lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we are back with yet another double feature, this time covering a couple of new releases still in theaters. We're talking about Black Phone 2 and Shelby Oaks. So if you only want to stick around for part of our discussion, be sure to use the podcast chapters to navigate the flow of the show. And with that out of the way, first up is Black Phone 2, which was released October 17th, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Now, Rowan, we covered The Black Phone a couple of years ago on the show, and if I remember correctly, we were both a little underwhelmed on it when compared to the general reception. A little bit muted, you might say. I think I was a little bit more charitable. I may have given it a yay, where you were an okay, I believe.
Yeah, I went and looked. You gave it a yay. I gave it an okay.
It was definitely a weak yay. I didn't go back and listen, but I would be shocked if I gave that like an emphatic yay. With Black Phone 2, it's now a winter horror with seemingly some more fantastical elements. So with all this in mind, was this enough for you to get excited for the Grabber's return?
At first, no.
Okay.
I was kind of, I think like at first time, just because I didn't love watching The Black Phone when we did it that time. That's the only time I had seen it. And so I was like, oh man, they're doing another one of these. And I thought the other one was pretty mid. And I know we were like the only two people I know that didn't love The Black Phone.
Yeah.
But the more I kind of became receptive to the trailer and was kind of like, hey, this kind of looks like they're trying to do some sort of, like Freddy Krueger's, fantastical stuff. Maybe this could be interesting. And then I did revisit The Black Phone the day before I went, and actually, like, even on Letterboxd, bumped it up a star, because I actually enjoyed that viewing quite a lot. I don't know if it was just, the atmosphere, you like had the headphones on, so all I was getting was that. It was, middle of the night. I just kind of vibed with it and ended up liking it a lot more on this rewatch than I did in the theater. I mean, still not, it's not like a 4-star classic, but I think I'd only given it like 2 stars or something. And I was like, you know what? This is like 3.5, I think. So yeah, I was getting myself pumped up for this. So I was kind of excited to go see this. What about you?
To be honest, this was one obviously where apparently I enjoyed it a little bit more than you the first watch, but The Black Phone isn't something that I really thought about going back to rewatch at any point in time. And this one was just one I never really paid too much attention to the trailers or the marketing. I heard it was a horror or a winter horror going in, which always piques my interest just because I want to see more winter horror movies like thrive, especially just growing up in Canada and like a northern part of it where it was just, there's a lot of territory we could still tread with winter horror. But also, I think my perception of what this movie was, even going in, was completely wrong. Obviously, I heard about it's like Freddy Krueger, or some people were like comparing it to like Dream Warriors or this sort of thing. But I think somebody somewhere along the line told me this was a prequel and was set in the 50s. So obviously, we'll get into, how much of that is true. But I went in and instantly I was like, who are these characters? Like, am I supposed to know who these are? Not realizing it was a direct sequel from the original Black Phone. That's how much of an impression that movie left on me. So, yeah, getting into the theater, I was excited, but I don't know if I was excited once I realized what we were getting, is what I'll say. So was this a franchise better left on ice? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
Have you heard of the Grabber? You're dead.
Dead is just a word. Did you think our story was over? You will pay for what you did to me. Vengeance is mine.
Rated R. Only in theaters October 17th.
Black Phone 2 was directed by Scott Derrickson and written by Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill. And the story is as follows. As Finn, now 17, struggles with life after his captivity, his sister Gwen begins receiving calls from a mysterious black phone and having disturbing visions of 3 boys being stalked at a winter camp known as Alpine Lake. As the visions grow increasingly violent, the brother-sister duo venture forth to uncover the boys' whereabouts and confront the Grabber, a killer who's grown even more powerful in death. Now here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Black Phone 2?
The first thing I'll say is I was kind of pumped just because I appreciate, because, I was thinking about sequels, as I was rewatching the first one and, just like iconic sequels and just horror sequels in general. And I'm like, what a real common thing that happens is like your cast never comes back. So they're like recasting or they got to like pivot. And I did really enjoy, unlike you, I guess, because I just rewatched the first one. I was like, oh, it's kind of nice that these characters are like back. It's the same actors. It's kind of got like that Stranger Things effect where like they're a little older now.
To be fair, in the story, it's also, I think, like a couple of years after as well.
Yes.
But yes, like Finn, the first one's probably like 13 or 14, and now he's 17 and he has hit a growth spurt for sure.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting, and I actually really like the character development in this one because I think it's so common with these that, like, especially the first one, it's like, the sister's like kind of, smart assy. She's like cursing all the time, like that kind of stuff. And I just think it's interesting. This one, like, actually shows like growth as they're getting older. Like, it's not like, oh, we brought the sister back and like she's exactly like she was when she was 10. Like, so like I appreciate it because that would just be an easy thing to be like, oh, these are the exact same characters, and other than this like trauma one of them has. And then, Ethan Hawke back, I didn't look too deep into it. I'm curious how much Ethan Hawke is back.
I'm curious of that as well.
Yeah, how much of this is just stunt double work and Ethan Hawke talking from his couch, just hanging out.
Yeah, I would wager a good portion of the Grabber was just from like a sound booth on this one.
Well, whatever, get your paycheck in, do what you got to do. But I thought this was kind of cool because you could see the freedom Scott Derrickson had in this. Obviously, this is based off a short story by Joe Hill. And even though everyone I've talked to says the first movie really isn't much like the short story, they still follow it to like a little bit. And, I think there's that pressure because they're like, they're turning this story into a movie, where this one, it's like, well, that was just a short story. Now we kind of just get to do whatever the hell we want with it. And I like that because I'm like, now we can like go wild. I like shit that just, even if it's a miss, like I want you to bat. I want you to just try to hit a home run and do something fucking wild and nuts.
Swing for the fences.
Exactly. And I think he did that here. Like, I mean, you took this like pretty, it was the first one was horrific, but it was more like I think we said when we reviewed it, like it kind of felt more like a true crime kind of story, other than like the kind of ghost kids. It was mostly just, it's like I'm watching some, like, I don't know, Lifetime true crime story unravel.
With even dramatic reenactments of how the kids
exactly.
were being abducted and whatnot.
Exactly. Where, like, this, I think Scott Derrickson's like, let's just, like, really lean into this being, like, a horror movie now and, like, have some fun with it. I thought the performance was pretty good. I like some of the things that I'm sure we'll get into where, like you, I had expectations kind of set up where I'm like, oh, okay, these are, they're doing, I heard the Dream Warriors thing, all this kind of stuff. And then, maybe them alternating from that, making it their own thing. Like that kind of, it got me excited because I was just like, this is, something cool. And, I as I have to say in all these, I'm just, I'm like a sad sports fan that's team is like 0-62. Like I'm over here on the Blumhouse bench and I'm just like, come on, man. And, it seems like this did box, office money. it seems that everyone really enjoyed this. I went at like a matinee and there was people. So, there must have been some excitement for it. What are your like initial thoughts here as I blob on?
Yeah, just to comment on the box office aspect of it. I went the weekend after opening weekend, which is odd for me. But most of the times I basically check out almost anything I'm interested in opening weekend. But I've just been so busy with work and, with the scheduling of this when we were going to record it that I went, I think it was the Friday night after opening. And it was still probably about 2/3 full. Yeah. And it was in a larger theater. This is definitely doing box office dollars. But in terms of the movie for me, I think this one for me is going to be more of the same in certain regards to the first one. I think the opening credits, the sequence, the song, how it's setting this tone is awesome. And I remember, I think with the first one saying the same thing, that is so unnerving, that kind of the footage that they're showing, it's almost like that snuff footage similar to something like Sinister. And that sort of footage does pop up from time to time in the movie that we're watching. But I think the movie it's selling in both of these movies is different than the movie we ultimately get. It like the title sequence is like gritty and scary and gross. And then you get a movie that is, a little bit of that, and then it's also like half kind of fantastical over the top. This is going to be a movie where essentially it's two separate movies, and I would have liked either movie if it committed, but it doesn't commit to either.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I feel about it. Also, just the fact where I was kind of sold a false bill of goods, where I thought this was a prequel that had nothing to do with the first movie, that when I got into the movie and, it has a cold open that takes place before, like, with different characters and whatnot, I was like, okay, here we go. Like, I'm completely into this. And then we cut and I go, who the hell are these children? Like, I had no clue who I was looking at until I saw the guy from Lost. And I was like, wait, that's the guy from the first movie. And then the movie kind of helps you along. It does some flashbacks and stuff, for people like me that didn't rewatch the movie to like make you realize like, oh no, this is a straight up sequel, like completely. All in all, there's a lot I like about it. I think it does kind of fall apart a little bit the longer it goes on for me. I think some of the way that the movie uses film or like stylistic sensibilities to kind of differentiate between like reality and dream sequences is really interesting. Like what he does here is like it really adds like an extra level of like surreality to the movie when you're watching it. Like it, and even the lighting changes and the color grading and everything, and it really helps make you feel like you're in a dream world. So like those sequences I really like. I really like sequences where you kind of get glimpses of the past at this, this camp that essentially our main characters are kind of gearing up to return to or to go to. And I really like a lot of that stuff. It gives, like I said, the snuff film vibes from Sinister. But kind of once we get to the camp, I think the movie winds up getting bogged down in what I call this holding pattern, where we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And in this movie, I feel we might even like overdo it like 2 or 3 times too much, where I started to get a little bit bored. And it also kind of hits at the same point as you're starting to get a lot of characters explain exactly what's happening or what has happened in the past. So you get all this exposition when you're hit with kind of the same narrative structure of like kind of uncovering some things in the day, uncovering some things in your dream world or whatever you want to call it, that it started to lose my interest a little bit. And I think if the movie committed one way or the other, I would have enjoyed it, as I said. Or if even like, let's say the grabber was a little bit more charismatic of like a character like a Freddy. He's in this weird zone where he says little one-liners every now and then, or he's kind of this flamboyant sort of killer, but he's not always that way. It's kind of seems to fit the scene. There's also just some ways in which the real world interacts with the dream world that I won't get into the specificity of, just not to spoil anything, that for me came off as a little goofy, that, we'll definitely discuss in the spoiler section. I guess for me, when I went into it, I didn't really expect it at times to feel like Stranger Things or something. And I find this movie very much feels like Stranger Things at points in it.
Very, very influenced. I felt the same.
Yeah, and it's like if you like Stranger Things and you like what it's doing with like kind of these cast of kids solving mysteries and having sci-fi and these like stylistic trappings from the 80s, you'll probably enjoy it a little bit more. For me, it was just like, once again, similar to the first Black Phone. I thought the first 30 to 40 minutes did such a good job of setting up a different movie and then it pivoted. In the original Black Phone, it just kind of gets boring and becomes almost like a chamber piece of just trying, like an escape room, trying to solve it with like dead kids helping you. This one definitely swings for the fences a lot more, as we said, and it becomes probably more of like closer to like a 70s or an 80s slasher, but it's still very much different than what I was enjoying leading into it. So yeah, it's a sort of thing where I don't feel like it fulfills fully what I wanted, I guess, with either genre.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of agree with all that. It sounds like I might have been enjoying myself a little more in the second half than you did, but a lot of the stuff you're talking about is exactly how I felt. Like, I think there did need to be a commitment, because I think they're at some point, because I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, when this ended, I'm like, oh yeah, like, you know, they can make like 8 of these now.
Oh, and I hope if they do make 8 of these, they commit more to the fantastical kind of over-the-top nature that some of it is there in the latter half of the movie that kind of brought me out of the experience. But I think, like, once again, if they just commit fully to this idea, I think it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, you know, I kind of thought about, you know, the grabber in the first one, and like, you know, I think one of the terrifying things about him, like, other than he kidnaps and kills kids, is like, you know, he's very muted. He's not like a charismatic character. He's very stoic and silent and like methodical. And I was like almost kind of thinking like, not that he was really stoic, but like I was almost thinking like in terms of like a Buffalo Bill, and like, you know, like Buffalo Bill's an awesome character, but like, you know, we couldn't have Buffalo Bill in every Silence of the Lambs, you know, sequel or prequel they made, where, yeah, like, it's like you kind of, I think in order to for a sequel and for this to go on, like, it's gotta be more energetic. It's gotta be, because I just think, yeah, people are gonna get bored when it's more leaning in this true crime mystery, and it's just kind of, you know, like, there's the grabber, and it's like, I said on the first one, awesome mask, great mask, but it's like, if that's, the mask can't be the personality, really. That rarely works. I mean, that's worked like, 2 times, like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, but even them, like, you know, even though they're stoic, like Jason Voorhees at least killing people wildly and, you know, throwing them around in sleeping bags and shit. And maybe it's the phoning in, just doing all your dialogue over the phone.
Yeah, and like, not to speak ill of Jason Voorhees or Friday the 13th, but a lot of those movies is less so about Jason as a character. It's about the kills and how fun it is, and, you know, seeing like these terrible like counselors get murdered in increasingly silly ways. The grabber has a vendetta against these characters. He is vengeful. He's, you know, making very serious threats, and he's not really giving quips and whatnot or having very much fun with it. He very much wants to kind of like kill these kids or ruin their lives, but not in a way that Freddy kind of takes the joy in it, and not in the facelessness of like a Michael Myers or a Jason. So he's in this weird area where Black Phone 4, he has to be quipping and going crazy, because otherwise this franchise is going to completely fall apart. And I do think they are, by the end of this movie, tiptoeing into definitely more towards like a Friday the 13th, or at least like an iconic slasher killer. It's just a lot of the movie leading up to that point definitely isn't that.
Different movie.
That's all. It's like if you watched the credit sequence that opens this movie, which is almost like a David Fincher 7 sort of, you know, gross true crime opening, and then you look at the third act that takes place on a frozen pond, they are vastly different movies.
Do you feel like, I kind of thought as we got into the movie and we're at the camp and stuff, like, it's almost a shame they didn't just populate the camp with kids.
Yes,
like,
I agree too. Yeah.
And like we said, that way, you know, just like we want Black Phone 8 to be, it's like, he should be killing as many of those kids. I just think it's less impactful when it's like, only a few are experiencing this, and the movie's like very kind of precious with, are people gonna die? What are we gonna what are we gonna do? Which also, like you said, is like tiptoeing that middle ground.
Yeah, because if you have, you know, a dozen characters and half of them get killed off, it winds up feeling a little bit more ridiculous than like a serious true crime drama. Whereas this movie, there's probably like 3 kids or 4 kids and like 3 adults. There's like 6 or 7 people in the movie. I mean, in your regular slasher, you'd have that numbers, if you're a good slasher within the first 40, 50 minutes, you'd have that amount of people killed off, right?
Yeah.
So it's the sort of thing where you're watching it, once again, it's just kind of battling with what it wants to be in the latter half. But yeah, I agree. Having this camp be open or have more people be kind of stuck at it in this blizzard, maybe some more like diversity in the types of people there, ages, all this sort of stuff could have definitely opened it up for a little bit more fun, especially if the grabber, has this vendetta, but other people are getting in the way of him fulfilling it. I think there is definitely something that could have been mined there that would have made the movie a little bit better, in my opinion. Anything else we want to talk about before we get into the spoiler thoughts?
No, let's...
Yeah, this is something like I would recommend you check it out if you've seen the first one and you've enjoyed the first one. I think if you like the Black Phone 1, you've likely already seen this. But if you did, I'm sure you'll enjoy Black Phone 2, which I think it's really funny that they cut the out of the title. But that's just, a minor grammar thing. But yeah, I mean, if you've seen the first one, go ahead, check out the second one. You probably have already. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the same. You've probably already seen this if you've seen the first one. But yeah, I think I'd recommend it. Everyone in my theater seemed to have a good time with it. And, there's lots of like hooting and hollering, which maybe made my experience like a little better with it. Like it was definitely a fun time and a fun crowd. And yeah, I think I would recommend it.
I actually had an obnoxious crowd of a lot of terrible. Yeah, probably I would think like 12, 13, 14-year-olds, where basically a lot of people were saying like, can you stop laughing, please? Or can you get off your phone? Or can you stop talking? And basically they were just like, no. And they continued the entire movie. I was down towards the front, but I heard a lot of like movement in the theater. Like this was definitely an audience that was pretty checked out, just too young, I would think.
Hopefully those kids didn't meet any magicians in the parking lot after.
Yeah, hopefully not. But yeah, Rowan's going to recommend you check this one out. I think check it out if you've seen the first one and enjoyed that. And with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Black Phone 2. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Black Phone 2, so if you have not seen Black Phone 2, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, I don't really feel any type of way about starting really anywhere with this one in terms of the spoiler-filled thoughts. What's something that leaps out to you that we should discuss?
I mean, I want to talk what my favorite thing about this movie is.
Okay.
Which, you touched on in the spoiler-free section, which is when we're kind of getting these drips of scenes of, like, the past kids, like, being killed by the grabber. And, just dripping dopamine into my sinister love brain because it feels so, so much like Sinister, where we're using that like home video camera. It's dark. You're not really sure what's going on. And then you just kind of get that glimpse. And I thought this was like so well done. And I mean, obviously, Scott Derrickson just flexing a little bit for you, being like, yeah, I know what you guys like. And I really enjoyed that. And like you said, I think, very, very reminiscent of our recent now slang. I kept thinking about Kid Print with that. Just kids being murdered, I guess. Not that I'm thinking about kids being murdered, people, all the time. But I thought it was like really well done. And then like, you alluded about, when we're in a dream state, we also kind of go to this, like tactile VHS kind of look. And I just thought it was an interesting, kind of very unique look. I don't think I've ever seen the dream world done like that.
Yeah, in my mind, I want to say maybe something like Censor did this as well, but I'm not 100% sure. This idea where it's very digital, and then when it's like this other reality, it seems like it's shot on film. I don't know if in this movie it actually is shot on film or not, but obviously heavy film grain, like we mentioned, all the color grading and everything's all different compared to the digital, and the lighting and whatnot gets more surreal. It is very obvious when you're moving from the real world to the dream world, which is very well done, especially when you have like the same characters kind of bridging the gap and there not being any huge noticeable differences in the environment or like in their costuming or anything like that. And yeah, I love the little snippets of almost like these snuff murders as well, of like the 3 kids. I thought they were very effectively done. And once again, that sort of vibe is very different than what we get when the grabber is on ice skates skating around with an axe, right? In the third act. They're like fundamentally almost like battling ideas. And I just really like kind of the snuff sensibilities of, you know, kind of what we're dealing with probably within the first hour. These kills, these kids, I guess kind of where the movie started to lose me a little bit is in the oven sequence. And I wonder how you felt about this, because essentially we have Gwen. She's investigating these 3 boys who have been killed in horrific ways. And one of them seems to have been burned in an oven. And essentially she goes in there and finds the grabber, and the grabber starts wrestling her. And then we see kind of the other people at this Christian youth camp come in, and all they see is Gwen like flying through the air and flipping around and whatnot. And it very much feels like something that'd be straight out of like an 80s horror movie for sure, like a Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah. But once again, watching this movie, it was just clashing so hard for me compared to what we've seen. How did you feel about Gwen flying through the air and, you know, it taking 3 or 4 people to wrestle her down to the ground and all this?
So, I mean, I really had to take myself out and then reassert myself in the film, because it is quite jarring, the kind of the difference, because that kind of like snuff aspect of the first one, like I thought really built up a lot of tension, and it was, you know, definitely did a good job. I think it like kind of, you know, getting people on the edge of their seats. And then, yeah, you know, flying around, as cool as it is, like, you know, everyone's kind of laughing at it, and it's a hoot and a holler. It's odd because I do like it. I really do like it. But if the whole movie was that, it would have been a little more appropriate. And, you know, yes, it's interesting that, you know, Gwen's the only one that kind of experiences this. But this is where I wish, yeah, they somehow were able to bring him in the other people or whatever. So that way we could see, like, some different uses of this, because it's kind of just all, you know, to me, I'm like, oh, this is kind of all the same thing, that he's going at Gwen and all that stuff. So I think I liked it a little more than you, but at the same time, it does jar you when that happens.
Yeah, I guess it's a way to get past the criticism that some people have had with something like recently, like Weapons, for example, where they say, all the horror takes place in this dream world. Why do I care? They're just nightmares. Why do I care? With this, it's kind of like Gwen is sleepwalking, and whatever's happening in the dream can actually affect her in real life. But also it seems like people obviously outside the dream can affect her as well, because they're holding her back and trying to prevent her from hurting herself or hurting others. And I thought it was interesting conceptually, but once again, where you know, Scott Derrickson wants to go is just take it way over the top. And I mean, if you think her kind of like hovering in the air and spinning around is over the top, by the third act, I mean, you're going to be like me, where you're like, what the hell am I watching? Where she's turning into like 11 at Stranger Things and blowing up phone booths and stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, what am I sat here watching?
Yeah, I mean, so I was just really living in my bag as it got crazier and crazier, because I'd be interested to, you know, hopefully someday he talks about it, but I was like, there is no way that not, you know, obviously people go to Freddy. I was like, there is no way a huge influence of this is not my all-time favorite Friday the 13th movie, Friday 7, which is really when they were like, hey, what happens when Jason Voorhees versus Carrie? Like, what happens? And that's what that movie was. It was like a girl with telepathy.
It's been a while since I've seen that one, but
it was a girl with telepathy. It was very similar to the grabber in this, where towards the third act, Jason's mask comes off and he's like zombie Jason, and he's all ghoulish, like almost to a T what this does. And I was like, yeah, there is no way. So that is like my all-time favorite Friday the 13th, and I was just loving this. Because by then I was already sold into, I'm like, you know what? Give me, screw 8. Let's get this to like 15 entries, like every year. This should be like Saw. Just pump them out now. Make them ridiculous. I'm on board.
What do you think about the solution of the mystery? Because I can't lie, I was definitely disappointed by this. I thought we were going to kind of track down each of these 3 kids where they've been killed, kind of find them and put the souls to rest, that sort of thing, take away the grabber's power. The fact that they were all killed in different ways, and then I'll disposed of in the same spot, which for me, who's someone, once again, Northern Canada, I've been ice fishing, I've been, on skating on small ponds and lakes. The fact that these 3 boys would be buried in this pond nearby and nobody thought to look, and that one of them would even be visible from like just by brushing off the ice's surface is so offensive to me as like kind of the solution to this mystery, especially within the cold open. You're seeing like dead boys float up and right on the ice from underneath that, I don't know. I thought it was an incredibly, disappointing reveal to this mystery, especially when all 3 of them are right next to each other and kind of getting chucked around in the finale to like grab the grabber and whatnot.
It doesn't say much for Mando's detective skills that he was
certainly not
utilizing.
That, 3 boys have been murdered, their remains haven't been found, and you don't check the nearby pond.
Yeah, and he's been looking for him for years and years. And the first time, he's like, oh, the pond. Why didn't I think about that? The one obvious place we could, you'd hide a body.
Yeah, kind of all this stuff for me. Just, once again, it's a bit morbid, but growing up, people have, been lost in ponds or lakes, drowned, that sort of thing. This idea that these 3 boys would have been missing for like 50 years or 30 years, whatever it is, and no one thought to check the pond. And then also in this third act, when we're kind of seeing what's happening beneath the water and, just all of the logistics, I understand it's somewhat of like a dream world and whatnot. But the fact that like the pond is like crystal clear underneath, you can just wedge yourself beneath these, oil drums and kick them up to the surface and all this stuff. Basically everything about this solution in the third act really didn't work for me at all. Like logically, obviously, but also just as this kind of satisfying ending, I guess, to defeat the grabber, like launching the 3 boys up through the ice at him. I don't know. It was a bit too much.
Kind of rude, I think, to do that to the remains. Just,
Yeah.
no cares for them whatsoever. I was going to say also, I did notice in this, I still kind of have an issue with the dad. We talked about it when we, discussed the first one, where it's like this irredeemable character that just beats the shit out of his kids an entire movie. And then, at the end, we're like, oh, that's nice. He's, he's hugging them and he's like...
He's great now. Yeah, he's all better.
And I still like kind of was thinking about it when I was watching this. And I'm just like, I don't like how now he's just like this kind of lovable character that's like, I don't really understand, other than if it's some weird nod to be like, hey, Joe Hill, we know your dad. He was definitely a raging alcoholic. Maybe I need to read the story. Like, maybe there's more to that in the short story. I still think it's a really weird character. And there's still like that tension in the beginning. Cause like when they go to camp, they they make the comments like, oh, you better not drink. Like, while we're gone. And because when they say that, I was kind of like, oh shit, maybe, he's going to become a piece of shit again. And that doesn't happen. And then I was like, oh, okay. So we're still just kind of ignoring the fact this guy's been abusing his children their entire lives, and he just decided one day to stop, and we're okay with that.
Yeah, I forgot about the rampant child abuse in the first movie. This one, he's just like a recovering alcoholic, and I kind of didn't understand why he was in the movie either, or at least I didn't like that he kind of shows up in the latter half of the movie with the snowplow to kind of save the day.
Yeah.
I understand having parents in these old horror movies and then the kids kind of move away from them and, the parents are just kind of not in them anymore. Like, it's an old trope that, there's lots of movies that don't even address that there's parents at all.
Yeah.
From the, like, back in, the 70s and 80s. But I don't understand the setting up the character, then basically doing nothing with him other than for him to show up with a snowplow in the third act. It was just like such a nothing burger of a character. And similarly, I don't remember the mom. Was the mom like in the picture at all in the first movie? Because I haven't seen the. No? Okay. So is this just.
The first one, all they do is set up that Gwen kind of has the same gift that
her mother had.
That the mom did.
Okay.
The first one only has the narrative that she had killed herself because of the gift, because of what she was seeing.
Okay, so at least that's in there. When I was watching it, I genuinely couldn't remember that her mom had the gift or that her mom killed herself. So when I came into this, I was like, this seems to be some really tragic backstory for this character, like that these kids have to endure. And Finn in particular, I thought was really strong, especially within the first probably 15 to 20 minutes of the movie, where I liked how he was acting out. I liked how he was a loner, just beating up kids, going out and like smoking dope by himself and kind of seeing the grabber. You know, I kind of am in the bag for horror as PTSD, and I think it's even more interesting when you actually have a sequel to a movie you've seen and the characters are experiencing that PTSD, because you know, anyone in real life that would go through what anybody goes through in a horror movie, you know, would feasibly have PTSD for probably the rest of their days. So I did really like that character. Especially in the beginning of the movie. I think it's interesting how he the protagonist of this movie kind of gets inverted from the other one. Like, he definitely starts to take a backseat the further this goes on. It starts to become wholly like Gwen's movie, and it starts to become like 11 facing off against the big bad for, you know, the last half of it.
See, and I did like that they did that, because I thought it was kind of, most movies, I think a lesser movie, and I'm not saying this is a masterpiece, but I think like a lesser movie, you know, would be like, all right, like Finney's gonna like kick some ass and stuff. But I think, like, you know, it's more common people with like some sort of like serious trauma like that, when they're, you know, when they've got to reface that trauma or like something similar to it, like they would kind of go inside themselves and revert and you know, just stay out of the situation. And I like that they kind of actually followed how I would think that trauma would actually affect you. And like you, like, I really liked the performance. I thought it was really good. And I did enjoy Gwen taking that front seat, but also seeing like Gwen isn't really like, you know, she's not really like cursing all the time, and she's not overly the smart mouth, but it's like seeing her like actually, oh, she's actually had some growth. Like I said,
yeah, she's
before,
matured and grown as a
she's
character.
not a 10-year-old kid, and it's not like, oh, we're gonna make sure that she's in all these movies and she's a smart aleck and stuff. And it's, I just thought it's interesting that they took such good care of like their two leads.
Now, the last thing I got to talk about, obviously there's a bunch I'd want to say about the third act and how they're fighting the grabber and whatnot. All I'll say is that, listen, the grabber on ice skates with an axe is sick. That should have been,
so good.
That vibe should have been in the movie a lot more than just in the third act, because it comes out of nowhere and I was like, what the hell are we watching? But specifically the very end of the movie, where it feels like kind of the worst of like a Mike Flanagan sensibilities, where it's like the big family coming together, we're all hugging, there's nice music playing, there's like, it's all brightly lit, and you know, it's a nice, I don't know, it's like so cheesy and cloyingly like, oh yeah, the movie's over, folks, like that it was so cheesy to me that I genuinely thought when they were kind of like driving away up the hill that the screen was gonna like slowly transition to like filmic grain on it,
yeah,
just to denote that this is not real and it was gonna end, because it was just so like perfectly cheesy 80s movie, and that was probably the intention, obviously, but it was just like, for a horror movie, I definitely wanted something a little bit meaner, I think, for the ending.
I love this, because not only do these characters invert, but we inverted. Because I kind of liked it, and I normally hate anything like this, where I was just like, oh, it's kind of, I was like, because I was like, this is kind of ballsy, because of course I was also expecting, I'm like, oh, they're going to do some, you know, like gotcha at the end, and then they didn't, and I was like, oh, you know what, and then I was like, so many horror movies that I've watched have these just like terrible, like, we hope you feel bad for yourself endings, which I get it. I'm the one that preaches to the choir that that's all I want, that's all I give me. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like a nice difference for me of like, this just ends, it's happy, but I still know that they're going to bring the grabber back. And
yeah, you like the Family Channel original ending. You were all about it.
I was all about it.
Anything else we need to talk about before we get into rating it? We didn't really talk about, I guess, the grabber losing his mask and like very much looking like an undead grabber by the end of the movie, I guess.
I mean, I would just say I do enjoy they step the gore up in this. Obviously, like the first one is scary, but it's like kind of real life violence. It's not horror violence, as I would say, necessarily, you know, other than like an axe in the head. But this is we're going in the 80s slasher cheese, like, you know, the grabber's getting fucked up and
the kid's head splitting in half with
I
the
loved
window
that.
pane. That was pretty
it.
gnarly.
Yeah, and that was like a ballsy risk to me because like when you know how many real tame Blumhouse movies have we reviewed, and I'm like, you know, like they obviously want to do a franchise, but I'm like, they're probably also gonna want a bunch of 12-year-olds to go see this, and I just like that they're like, no, you know what, we're gonna actually keep one of our future franchises that we can actually make like R-rated films, and obviously they're successful.
Yeah, I hope if they go forward with this franchise, which, I mean, the box office seems to suggest that they will, that they definitely lean more into the latter half of the movie sensibilities, where we do make the grabber kind of this omnipresent, this omnipowerful force that can kind of get you at any point in time when you're asleep or dreaming or when you're thinking of this trauma. Just because I did think that was at least more fun for me to watch, because I know they're not going to commit to the first half of the movie of like the more true crime, gritty, scary in that regard. So let's just lean full hog into the grabber, you know, especially the way he is in the last half of this movie, and actually make something a little bit more entertaining. This was one of those that, even though it's under 2 hours, if you would have asked me how long it was, I would have definitely said like, oh yeah, this is like 2 hours, 15 minutes sort of territory. It definitely felt long to me. So yeah, let's just make the next one a little bit shorter and a little bit more fun, and I think I'll be on board a little bit more with it. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give Black Phone 2?
So I said I came around on the first one a bit, although I'm like still pretty comfortable with maybe a stronger okay, maybe a light yay. This one, I really had a good time in the theater. The crowd was awesome. That always helps. But like, you know, I think when this starts to get wild, like we said, it's so much fun. It is a shame there's a tone shift, because I also really like what they're doing at the beginning. And, you know, I love, there's not a lot of things, and there's definitely nothing that Blumhouse ever does that I'm just kind of like, I'm like, feel gross watching it, which is what I want to feel. And that, like, the first half of this movie, they do such a good job of like producing that unsettling feeling. I think I'm gonna give this one a yay though. Like I want to go see it again. Like, or I'm not who are you kidding? I'm definitely gonna buy it. But like, yeah, I just had a really good time with it. I told everyone about it. Like, it's a movie that like after I saw it, I'm at work, I'm doing that kind of thing. I'm like, oh yeah, you got to go see the Black Phone 2. It's like so much fun. And I'm like, I don't even give a shit if you saw the first one. Just like this one is. They'll give you enough backstory, and like
I kind of feel that way too, to tell you the truth. I don't know if you have to see the first one. It's just for someone, you should know that going in that it is a direct sequel.
But I had a lot of fun with it, and I kind of, it's very rare that we review not just a horror movie but a horror franchise that like I'm optimistic about what the future holds for it. And like, I'm interested to see if Scott Derrickson will continue doing these, or will this be the case where like he kind of, you know, executive produces it and hands it off to like up and comers and stuff, which I think could also work. Because if you're gonna get wild, you know, what a great like proving ground for like new horror filmmakers. Then like, how wild can you make a Black Phone sequel? But yeah, I'm going to settle in with a yay. What about you?
I love this because this is like the complete inversion of the last episode, the last time we reviewed the Black Phone. Because what's funny is, I'm going to make no sense. I think this movie is better than the original Black Phone, but I'm still giving it an okay, which makes no sense. But the reason why is because when I watched the Black Phone, the first one, I think the stylistic sensibilities, like once again, like kind of committing to this serious true crime horror vibe for the first hour, that opening credits, everything just felt a little bit more novel to me. Where when I was watching this one, I loved, once again, where we were for the first probably 35, 40 minutes and what I was committing to. But then I realized the movie was switching again on me and we were committing the past mistakes. So I do think in a lot of ways, this probably is a more competent movie than the Black Phone 1. It is probably more fun. There is, I would say, more to enjoy about it, even in some of the filmmaking sensibilities, as we've mentioned, with the film grain and the color grading and just the stylistic tweaks that it makes throughout it. It's a more competent film, I would say, overall. It's just, for myself, it didn't hit as hard, I guess, as the first one. Yeah. It's the sort of thing where if you looked at what I'd rate them on Letterboxd, they'd both be rated the same. But if you talk to me in person, I'd say like, oh, I preferred the Black Phone 2 a little bit more overall, just as a movie. It's just it didn't hit as hard because it did a lot of what the first one did, other than in the latter half, you know. So it still disappointed me in kind of the same ways. So yeah, it's gonna be an okay from me. And I guess with that, we should probably just get into our second movie of the episode. I never know how to transition, but I guess we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Now that our phones are no longer ringing off the hook, it's time to discuss our second film, Shelby Oaks. Shelby Oaks was released October 24th, 2025, exclusively in theaters. Rowan, I feel like I've been hearing about this movie for years. It had its initial Kickstarter, it had a turn at a couple of festivals. Eventually, it was acquired by Neon, then Mike Flanagan came on executive producing. Was this something that was on your radar? Are you a big fan of Chris Stuckman's movie reviews? You know, where are you looking forward to Shelby Oaks?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone that is in the movies and has YouTube, like, has come across Chris Stuckman at least, and he was someone I enjoyed watching. I was always I kind of got first introduced to him, not necessarily through his movie reviews, but a lot of, like, kind of his vlog stuff where he just, you know, kind of talks about, like, obviously he's been very vocal about, like, being from, like, a Mormon family and kind of like
Jehovah's Witness.
He's a Jehovah's Witness,
yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And, like, walking away kind of from that religion and the impacts it's had on him and his family and that. So I've, like, that's kind of how I got introduced to him. And then obviously, you know, watching his reviews, and really I'm just watching because whenever he changes his background, I'm trying to see what movies he's got set up and all that kind of stuff. But like, prolific. I mean, he's like a prolific YouTube content creator. And I mean, I'm always interested in YouTubers making this crossover. Obviously, you know, with the Philippou brothers, we've been like very successful. You know, that's like the prime example. And, you know, you and me were big milk and cereal fans of.
Yeah. Curry Barker. I think
Curry
his name
Barker.
is.
You've seen this new one. I haven't yet, but you know, hear great things. And so I'm just always interested to see how that works out. And especially for, you know, those guys are really big, but like, I feel like, you know, Chris Stuckman is like big. Like, he is a huge YouTube guy, like massive. And headlines, conventions, like that kind of big. So yeah, I was just like very interested. I was wary. I knew it was found footage, and I'm always, you know, that's not my favorite genre. So I was like, oh, here we go. Like, how's this gonna go? Like, oh, of course it's found footage, and, you know, cheapest way to make a movie. So yeah, I was anticipating this just to see how it was. What about you? You a Chris Stuckman fan, or?
A fan's a little bit of a strong word for it now, but I mean, he's definitely someone I have been subscribed to for probably, 12, 13 years, probably, maybe even longer than that. He's kind of the prototypical YouTube movie reviewer. Like, if anyone searches up a review for pretty much any movie, like, let's say back in like 2011 through to probably like 2017, you'd probably get a Chris Stuckman review. And then eventually he started to pivot and, you know, kind of pursuing filmmaking a little bit more. And it gets to this awkward point of when you speak ill of people kind of achieving your dreams, even if they're achieving them poorly, or at least in a way that, you know, you would hope that you wouldn't do it. It's kind of awkward. So he's kind of pivoted in later years to more so just only review things he likes, or at least has something nice to say about, or kind of cataloging his filmmaking journey. And there was just a point at somewhere along the road where I stayed subscribed to the guy, but I just haven't really watched any of his movie reviews after a certain time.
Yeah.
And I think it was the sort of thing where he was rating everything a B at some point. And like, once again, I'm one of those people that, you know, I obsess over Letterboxd. I hold people accountable to, you know, when Rowan gives Jaws a 4-star, but also gives something else a 4-star. And he was kind of one of those early people I noticed that he was just rating everything favorably, I guess.
Yeah.
You wanted to say something there?
I was going to say, I remember, because I think he just doesn't rate it anymore.
Yeah,
now.
He probably doesn't anymore.
Because I know he gave a big speech now that he was making a movie that he didn't want to criticize other filmmakers.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that cowardice or...
I think it makes sense if they're going to wind up being your peers.
Yeah.
I do. But yeah, in terms of Shelby Oaks, I was a Kickstarter backer at some point along in the project. I don't know if I was there in the initial like 600K or if I pledged afterwards, but I've been getting all the backer emails and whatnot now for months. This is something that we probably discussed, if I'm not mistaken, on both of those like look ahead episodes of like let's take a look at what's coming out in the next year in horror, because I think originally it was supposed to release last year, and then it was, Neon acquired it and got all this extra funding to kind of bring his vision a little bit more in line with what he wanted to achieve. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge footage fan. It's one of my favorite genres, and I think it is just that part of me that wants to eventually make films myself, and I just find it encouraging or inspirational even that what people can achieve with such a small budget and kind of shitty camera equipment or shitty lighting. Like it really is just being able to sell the scare or fully kind of engross you in this world and this story that makes a lot of those found footage movies so accomplished, or maybe having one or two good jump scares in it. It's the sort of thing where it's still kind of quaint, where a lot of movie nowadays or filmmaking in general is just kind of so bombastic. I find it still interesting where a lot of found footage stuff people can just kind of make with a small group of friends, over the course of a few weekends or what have you.
Yep.
So yeah, no, Shelby Oaks, definitely something I was looking forward to, but I don't know if I would have been able to tell you what it was about really before, like leading into it. I don't remember seeing any trailers. There were definitely some posters and stuff around the local Cineplex, but it was more so something that I was just trying to avoid fully, like what it was about going in. So should have Stuckman stuck to YouTube? Well, before we get into that, let's take a listen to the trailer.
I've been searching for Riley for the last 12 years.
We should let the police take care of it.
They already gave up on her. I know. My sister's not dead.
Shelby Oaks was directed by Chris Stuckman and written by Chris Stuckman and Sam Liz, and the story is as follows. A woman's desperate search for her long-lost sister takes a turn when she realizes that the imaginary demon from their childhood may have been real. Now, here on Now Slang, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Shelby Oaks?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll, in the spoiler section talk about, but yet another movie that has kind of like a tonal shift, not necessarily the middle of it, but definitely like a jarring shift in what it's trying to do that definitely, changed my perceptions of what I was watching or what I was expecting to watch. I will say, I'm very kind of pleased to report that, like, I think Stuckman's got a pretty good eye, a better eye than I was kind of expecting. I think this looks really good.
I would agree with that.
I think this looks good in both the tonal shifts of the two different kinds of horror movies that are in this. I think both are executed really well. I had a lot of shades the first half of it of Lake Mungo.
100%.
I thought it really had that vibe. Obviously, like, very influenced by, like, Netflix and very, like, current true crime stuff. And, I do think we fall apart a little bit as we go.
I would agree.
We get a little more traditional, a little more tropey. And unfortunately, I think this peaks really early and then just kind of like fumbles along. I don't like to it sucks, but for like a debut, you're going to stumble somewhere. I was kind of impressed with the cast overall. I'm not super familiar with Camille Sullivan.
Me neither.
I see she's from Toronto, Canadian woman, but I thought she was fantastic in this. You're going to win me over, even when you're only getting like 2 minutes of Keith David.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impressive in itself. Kind of also super pumped about Michael Beach, because I was a huge Sons of Anarchy guy, and Michael Beach was like the leader of the Black motorcycle gang, and I mean, he's also famous for he was in ER and...
you just... I realized who you were talking about. He was like the police chief or something in this movie,
chief,
right? Yeah. Okay. God, I didn't recognize him, like, not in his motorcycle attire. Okay.
Yeah.
Neat.
I mean, he's in tons of stuff. I love that.
Yeah.
And then I know, if Mike ever listens to this episode, he'd be like super depressed if I didn't say anything. But Brendan Sexton III, I think I've said it before on the main show. I'm a huge Empire Records guy. Like, an all-time movie for me, and he's like the comedic character in that, the kid that keeps coming into the record store and robbing it and just like stealing.
Okay.
Like he's literally like 15 in that movie, so it's just kind of funny that he was the husband, and I'm like, wait, how do I know this guy? And then I'm looking and I'm like, holy shit, it's the kid from Empire Records.
Wow.
Great stunt casting.
The one person you didn't mention, who I think was actually the best in the entire movie, is Sarah Dern. I thought she was excellent. She plays Riley Brennan, who obviously the mystery of the movie is where is Riley or what happened to Riley. So she has a lot of kind of selling this idea of this YouTube channel, the paranormal paranoids, or you really have to buy into kind of the sisterly love between her and Mia for kind of the core mystery and the emotional aspect of the movie to work it all. And I just thought she did a really good job of selling kind of that ghost hunter sort of character that I could understand how people might be obsessed with them vanishing and what exactly happened to her. I just thought she was really impressive. I do think overall the performances across the board are pretty like they're pretty well acted in this movie, especially for a directorial debut. Even I will say Mia in some regards, like what she's doing after kind of this stylistic shift in the movie. I don't know if her performance was quite as alluring or quite as natural after we make this pivot, but I still did enjoy following her, and I did like seeing, like towering screen icons like Keith David not just phoning in. He's there for basically a cameo, and I thought he was great. I thought it was a good thing where I left the movie and I said, damn, Keith David was, he was still great in this, and good on Stuckman to, get obviously it probably doesn't take much to get a good performance out of Keith David, but I could also understand how Keith David would come on board this project and just be like, I don't care, man. I'm just I'm here for the one day, right? Like, who cares? But kind of getting back to what you were saying, I think this movie owes a lot to other movies.
Yes.
And I feel like it doesn't really offer basically anything new that we haven't seen in any other movie. I'll get into more in that in the spoiler section, but the fact that you mentioned Lake Mungo, and I think anyone who has seen Lake Mungo will watch this and be like, oh, he's doing a Lake Mungo, is kind of a testament to the movie that at least that it got us close enough to remind us of Lake Mungo, but also that Lake Mungo is just doing something so effectively that if you kind of get close to it, you're going to always be reminded of it. The cinematography for me as well, it didn't wow me, but it didn't look cheap. It was the sort of thing where this movie was made for less than some of the movies I've worked on, and a lot of the movies I've worked on look worse than this movie, right? Like it's the sort of thing where it really does go to show if you have like a good creative team around you, you can make something that looks pretty professional. Like obviously there's aspects of like, let's say the visual effects at times weren't great.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of times in the movie when they're used sparingly or shown very quickly in the dark that they actually look pretty effective, or like they're fine, or at least don't pull you out of the movie. And once again, on a movie of this budget, you shouldn't be able to even achieve good visual effects at all, right? So the fact that you can kind of get away with it every now and then, I think is pretty effective. What I will say is I completely agree with you that once it shifts away from what we're doing for probably the first, 20, 25 minutes, the movie winds up being a little more cliched or a little dull, or even the sort of thing where I was just yearning. I was like wishing the whole movie just kind of stuck to a certain aesthetic. And I wonder, like, I wonder why we had to shift away from it. I feel like he could have made the movie for cheaper, committed to that aesthetic that he was doing so well. And I think the movie would have been better for it. So I would love to hear him talk about why he made this concerted change in kind of the filmmaking style and shifting it from one sort of movie to another. Because I just think he was way more successful at one of the two movies, I guess. So, yeah, it's the sort of thing for me where when I was watching it, it's 91 minutes long. It felt long. I think partially because this kind of big change that we keep tiptoeing around. I think it comes at a point in the movie that to us as the audience almost feels like it should be like the midpoint of the movie. But realistically, you're like a fifth or maybe a quarter, if you want to be like charitable, into the movie. So you still have a long way to go. And essentially, I just think the filmmaking and the storytelling and whatnot in that, the last 3/4 of the movie is just a little bit weaker than what we started the movie with.
I kind of thought about it while I was watching it, was like the first half I thought was successful in the fact that I was like, okay, like I can see I'm watching like a Neon movie. Like, this looks good. This is Neon. Neon has a thing. I don't know what it is, but
Which was impressive because he wasn't Neon when he was making this movie. He was just a dude.
Yeah.
So once again, it's very, and I guess obviously we don't know what was reshot or what was punched up to make it fit a certain aesthetic, or, I have my guesses. But I agree, it looks very competently like just a regular kind of elevated horror sort of movie for a good portion of it.
Because there was stuff that I was like, if you didn't tell me, like there's shots that I'm like, oh, this could be out of like an Osgood Perkins film. Yeah. And then, like I said, you're getting that movie, but then I'm also kind of getting a movie that I feel would just go to Paramount Plus, or it would just be like a streaming movie. And not necessarily, like those are fine, but it's just, they're so jarring when they're put up against each other.
There is a movie that feels derivative of Lake Mungo, but it's doing a good derivative Lake Mungo. And to tell you the truth, we don't get many movies that actually feel like Lake Mungo. And then there's a movie that feels derivative of probably every elevated horror movie you've seen for the past 10 years, but done like way worse than a lot of those movies. Yeah. So you have a movie that's like 80% of the way to Lake Mungo that you're like, okay, this is pretty good. Like, I'm pretty impressed. But then you have a movie that is, I don't know, 50% of the way to like The Witch or Hereditary or something. And you're like, okay, well, this kind of feels like cheap and like direct to video kind of slop, like you're more or less saying. Not necessarily entirely bad, but just kind of prompts the question of like, what was the decision making that brought you to this point, is kind of my thoughts on it. Yeah. I will say overall, I did enjoy a lot of what I was seeing. And it's the sort of thing where I would hope maybe on his next movie he doesn't write it. I didn't like hate the writing, but it was definitely like over like expository once again. Just there's moments in this movie where there's people just talking to each other, explaining everything that's happening, and it's just like, that's the worst way to like reveal, let's say, the core mystery of the movie, is just having two people talk to each other, one person constantly asking the questions and the other person giving the answers. So there was just some stuff like that in the movie that made it feel a little bit more amateurish and made it feel like a directorial debut, where something like, let's say, a Talk to Me, when I watched it, I felt like there was nothing really in there that felt like a directorial debut to me, other than very much feeling like they had to make an impact. Where this, I feel like he makes somewhat of an impact for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then it winds up feeling like almost any other horror movie you'd see from, the last 10 years to lesser effect.
Great score, though. I did really enjoy the score. Obviously, he got the Mike Flanagan seal of approval. Mike Flanagan presents this, and he got full use, I guess, of those assets, because I saw the Newton brothers who did the score for this, who are Mike Flanagan's guys. They do all of his scores.
Okay.
So, and I mean, like, I would say at this point, like, Haunting on Hill House, like, those scores are kind of like iconic. So they did score this. I did note it quite a few times where I was like, oh, it was kind of funny, because even in the latter half that I wasn't overly loving, I was like, oh, the music's like pretty competent right now. So at least it's got that going for it.
Nice. Okay. I'm not going to lie and say I noticed the score. Yeah. I feel like if you put a gun to my head and play two pieces of the music, I'd be able to pick it out, but I just can't recall it, like, sitting here right now, what it sounded like, but I'll take your word for it. Would you recommend people check this out in theaters?
I think I would, even though I sound like Mick's on it. Like, I went in and, like I said, there was things that threw me off, there was things that disappointed me, there was things that surprised me, but I've seen a lot worse directorial debuts,
for sure,
with much less promise than I think is in this, and I think those little glimpses are kind of worth it. And like I said, I'll get more into it in the spoiler section, but I think either way, if this had to lean one way or the other with what kind of movie it was, I probably wouldn't have hated either one. It's just, it's very similar to our Black Phone conversation. Like, if we were gonna do like a direct to streaming type thing, I would have rather just leaned into that, and then because then I can be a little more forgiving on that stuff. But because there's such a strong 25 minutes, I'm just like, oh, shit, man. Like, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think go check out A New Horror Voice. I think it's worth I watched this. For some reason, Cineplex had it in like the biggest theater they had next to the IMAX.
Okay.
Probably watched it in the creepiest scenario, which was me and a guy, like 50-something-year-old guy, a couple rows down, that if I had to assume, I'm gonna say was schizophrenic, and he just kept talking to an empty seat, and like he was in like some sort of argument with the seat, and he was like, I felt bad. He was like very like frustrated, and he was like trying to watch the movie, and then he'd be like yelling at whoever was not there, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So then I'm watching the movie, and I'm also like, oh man, what if this guy just murders me in Shelby Oaks?
Yeah, it definitely adds to it. We would have had our own sequel to Shelby Oaks about the podcaster that got murdered during the screening of Shelby Oaks.
Sadly, our
what happened to Rowan Fraser?
Our podcast isn't as cool of a name as their YouTube channel. So
no, definitely not. No, we'd have to rebrand or something. But
what about you? Would you recommend it?
Yeah, I was kind of mixed on which way I'd go with this, because I can't really qualify it on saying like, oh, have you seen Shelby Oaks 1? Check out Shelby Oaks 2. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and recommend you check it out in theaters as well. I think this is a small enough movie that our audience, if you're listening to our thoughts on the movie, you should probably, shill out to go and see it. I mean, it's not like it's black phone numbers or something. I mean, this movie was made for probably $2 million, and I think it made like $3 million or something. So this is the sort of movie where your ticket price, it could actually affect whether or not this filmmaker gets to kind of, make a second movie. And the movie was competent enough that I would certainly like to see Chris Stuckman do something again. I would hope maybe on his next outing he would mine some of what he's discussed in some of his more personal videos of, like, for example, getting out of the Jehovah's Witness or some of that cult horror, because I think he would actually have something to say if he really kind of made a little bit more of a personal movie, something closer to like a Saint Maud. Let's say, I think I would like to see from him. It looked like you wanted to say something.
Well, I was gonna say, I think it's interesting. I did see him talk about this, and I suggest anyone like watch. Like, he has made a couple videos about making it, and I think it's just an interesting movie for where he is in his life. Like, he was talking about how he's been working on this forever, and how it like really matched up. Because like he was saying, just like the other month, he basically reconnected with his sister, who he didn't have any connection with for like 20 years.
Okay.
Because she was still a Jehovah's Witness, and she has like left, and now they're like reconnecting. And, like he was talking about just how obviously like trying to find your sister and stuff was like just subconsciously going through his brain, even though that's happening now, and he obviously has been working on this for a long time. So
yeah, it was more of a coincidence that those things kind of timed out right. But yeah, so it seems like both of us are going to recommend that you check out Shelby Oaks in theaters, and with that, I think it's time to cut to our spoiler discussion for Shelby Oaks. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Shelby Oaks, so if you've not seen Shelby Oaks, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, we were tiptoeing around that this movie has a major stylistic shift, where essentially it was billed and kind of promoted as this found footage horror movie, maybe even a bit of a mockumentary. But, we're in the spoiler section. He does a very good job of aping that style and creating that sort of movie for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then you almost get like a Zach Snyder-esque like title treatment for Shelby Oaks that felt very reshot and like Mike Flanagan and Neon to me, like where they wanted to put some budget into it. Lots of slow-mo, lots of like sweeping shots, lots of like, drama essentially unfolding. But then it becomes kind of a regular horror movie, shot like a regular horror movie like you would see, I don't know, on Amazon Prime or something. I was so disappointed when it shifted from the mockumentary style. Don't get me wrong, didn't lose me right away, but it was the sort of thing where I was like, okay, there's no way that you can be as competent at making this mockumentary found footage style and then also be like this competent at making a traditional horror feature film. Just because, I mean, one, there's like 5 good examples of probably. The other, there's probably hundreds of examples of, so it was the sort of thing where I was like, he was going into a whole other league. And just a bit tough.
Yeah, it's very jarring. Like you said, in the first half, as someone that doesn't like found footage very much, I was like, I really like this. It's kind of weird to say. It's like, it's very refreshing when people don't be like, I'm going to make a found footage film in 2024, 2025, and I'm going to make it look like a found footage film from like 1980. Like, so I like that he was using like, you know, it's like high quality. It looks like a Netflix true crime documentary. So it's like something we're all familiar with, and that it's like it's based in the now, and just
the talking heads, of the documentary were now. And then obviously the footage that we were watching was like 2007
but like that's all
footage.
cut into, you know, that would be cut into a Netflix documentary like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just kept thinking too, I was like, man, maybe Netflix is just going to hit them up and be like, hey man, we need someone to start making some true crime documentaries.
Making a Murderer 3
That's
by
right.
Chris Stuckman.
And like, even, you know, we're joking about the Zach Snyder stuff, but even that, I was like, this looks insanely good. I'm like,
that looked so good. It looked so much better than the rest of the movie that I was shocked. You know, that like credit sequence, it just very much feels like Mike Flanagan came on board and he was like, Chris, you know, your movie starts off fine here. You know, it got the gunshot go off and then we just crashed to the title card. But what if we like made this operatic sweeping intro for like a minute with the music playing and all the slow motion? That I do think it really like set up and made this movie feel larger than what it is.
Oh,
it was
100%.
just it was just like 5 minutes later we were into like kind of the low budget horror movie again.
Well,
that's all.
Yeah, and that's kind of the rough thing when you mimic, you know, this who was it, Nemi Cave or whatever that did, you know, Fresh, where we're just getting the title card half hour in. It's like when you do this, you kind of, you know, you got to bring it. You got to bring it afterwards. You can't do it and then just totally flop and fumble the ball right after.
It's just funny because it's almost like I can just point to it on like an editing timeline and be like, yep. So that's where the movie gets progressively worse from that moment on. Once the title card actually comes up at the end of this long title sequence that's really snazzy, that's where the movie just continues to get worse and worse. And I don't know if it ever gets to the point of where it's like entirely bad. There's definitely bad moments throughout it, and there's definitely moments where kind of his reach outseeds his grasp. You know, it's the sort of thing where he's going for something like that his visual effects can't achieve, for example. But overall, like, it was the sort of thing when I was watching it, there was still a lot of interesting aspects to it. And also some lovable little moments that I just want to point out. One, in that found footage section, they do the Lake Mungo, where they go like, we've reviewed this footage hundreds of times, but we've never noticed this. And it zooms into kind of the window, and there's a crack in the window, and they're supposed to be showing you something. And when I was looking at the footage, I still didn't see what they were showing. Did you see what we were supposed to be seeing in that moment? Because basically, it was supposed to be a black shadow on a black window at nighttime. And I was just like, I don't know if we're seeing what you're trying to show, man. Well, every single time in Lake Mungo, when they do that, they zoom in and they show like the little girl's face over here, but then also there's someone in the room over here and all this sort of shit that they hid. This was like, well, of course I didn't see the black apparition on the black background in the reflection of the window. You know, it's just, it was just kind of funny that I got a kick out of like, look at this big revelation and the music's playing. And I was like, bro, I can't see what you're trying to show us. It was just kind of cute.
Yeah, I mean, I love that stuff in Lake Mungo. I liked it in here just because I thought it was funny because there's a lot of that. Like, and, you know, they keep showing this figure, which I think in these aspects with the found footage stuff, like, was pretty good, like pretty effective because you barely see it. It's blurry,
black figure, kind of like a shine in the eyes, kind of just like almost like a white, you know, white glisten was kind of all you could really see.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the real issue with, is it like Tyrion, or I think is the name of the
Tyrion the Incubus.
Yeah, which, you know, this is one of those cases like less is more. The more we see of it, like, I thought I laughed. Well, it was actually kind of funny because I'm not gonna lie, when she was in the jail and then the dog, you knew it was gonna happen. Then the dog barked. I jumped. I'm sorry. I'm just a disappointment. But then the arm comes out, and I laughed. I was laughing because I was like, this looks so shitty. Like this like demon CGI arm touching this like there's some like they use real dogs in some of it, and then there's like some CGI dogs going on.
So what's interesting is I agree, but they do use CGI dogs every now and then, and they actually still look good, which is impressive. So to do like a CGI dog at the end of a driveway at night where its eyes are shining, and it's like, you know what? That looks like
that one.
85% of what a dog should look like enough that I will buy it in your horror movie. But to then show like a black arm coming out to grab somebody, and it's like, oh my God, what was that? Or like, you know, Tyrion near the end of the movie where it's kind of doing these almost like shadow play, like larger than life behind certain figures and whatnot. All that looks pretty bad as well. So it's interesting that in my mind, a much more complicated thing to do, like a dog, looks better, I would say, most of the time compared to just like a shadow or a figure, you know?
And the thing is, like, it's not even like I hated the Tyrion shadow idea, but I kept thinking, I was like, I feel like you could achieve this way better practically than you could with this weird CGI thing.
I mean, all you'd have to do is put a big guy in a costume.
Which they do. I mean, I'm looking it up, and like, you know, there's like 4 people credited as playing this demon. The main guy is the guy that I think it's the guy that played Jason in the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th.
Oh, okay.
But to me, whatever they did, like they obviously, maybe the practical was too dark or something. Like they obviously put some CGI effects like around it or on top of it or something. Like it looked weird, and I was still kind of on board with it, even though it looked weird. It's just, I felt really weird about all that stuff. Cause like I said, to me, it seemed like a direct to streaming movie, which I'm all for one, but it was just so good in the first half. I was like, this is a totally different movie than I kind of thought I was buying into. My biggest faux pas with this, which has nothing to do with monsters, has, you know, nothing to do with like the change and the, you know, how they film it, all that stuff. Like, I absolutely refuse to believe that she would just have that blood all over her face for like 24 hours.
Full day. Yeah.
She
I
just
agree. I
never
clocked
wiped
that as
it.
well.
I was like, what is going on here?
Somebody shows up at your doorstep, blows their own head off in front of you. The blood splatters all over you, and you just leave it on until you go to bed that night. Like, insane behavior. I understand why you'd maybe want to keep it on there for like a moment, like maybe a scene directly after it, and then kind of snap out of it and go wash their face. But she had it on for like multiple scenes afterwards where I was like, what are we doing here? It starts to strain credibility of what anyone would do. Like, maybe if it was a family member or something, you know, you leave it on a little bit longer, but not just some random stranger showing up on your doorstep. I mean, that's just, that's insane behavior.
Yeah, I just kept laughing every time they showed her with blood. I'm like, your husband's not even going to say anything like, hey, you want a towel or something? It's just like, no.
That's tough.
But even in, you know, the second half, like, I'm a sucker, man. I was all for like her watching the tapes and just like I thought that was all cool, like going through the tapes. I thought it looked really cool. Like you said before, like the Paranormal Channel, as much like, because when they're first, what were they called? The
Paranormal Paranoids.
Paranormal Paranoids. I was like, man, what a bad name. And I was like giggling at it. And then I was like, this is exactly what some fucking YouTube channel that would do this would be called.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just really well done. That I was just like, I thought that was all real, kind of true to life, what I would expect this Paranormal Channel to kind of be like.
Yeah, I wish there were more revelations when combing through that footage, because I think there's only a couple. There's one where we see like the figure in the once again the black figure in the black window with a reflection on it. That is just like, I don't even know how you see any of this. But then there's also like, isn't there something in the background where they're like, oh, maybe she was being watched or something at the amusement park in the back left corner? I just wish there was more things in the footage. I feel like if you freeze frame and go through like some of the digital artifacting, you could probably find some things, but the movie themselves, or the movie when we're watching it, it doesn't point it out at any point in time.
Yeah.
So it just feels like you're combing through all this footage and really only coming up with two kind of minor revelations, one of which you can't even see, at least on my theater screen. So it wasn't like a huge payoff, even though I did enjoy it. The other thing I'll say is that I got really confused when she was discovering who kind of killed her sister or killed the other people and took her sister away, because you see a shot of a guy and his head is like upside down because he's just, you know, the way he's leaning over the camera, and he has a beard, and then she's kind of like horrified, obviously, that she's seeing her sister's killer or presumed killer. And then her husband opens the door behind her and comes in, and the way it was all screened and like played out to me was like, wait, is her husband the killer? Her husband refused to be interviewed in this, you know, talking head documentary. What is this? And then it's like, oh no, it's just her husband's her husband. You know, there's nothing there.
It's actually just, it was just some
weird.
Redneck guy.
Yeah, it was just weird to cast two dudes with like similar facial hair and, you know, hair on top of their head, and then the revelation to be like, no, it's actually not her husband. They, you know, it's just, he just didn't want to be interviewed for this part of the story, or we couldn't afford to bring him back at the time, you know, that sort of thing. It was a bit bizarre to me, because I clocked, obviously, like anybody watching this movie would clock like, oh, it's weird that the husband doesn't want to be interviewed.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's nothing nefarious behind it. It's either a budget reason or purely just through the logic of the story, he kind of drifts away from her wanting to solve the mystery of her sister's disappearance. So there was just a couple of moments like that when I was watching the movie. It reminded me that this is a directorial debut, and maybe what he's trying to accomplish on screen isn't always effectively conveyed, I guess. Or his misdirection actually misdirected, but not to a satisfying end, I guess, like that sort of thing when I was watching it.
Yeah, I mean, there was just, I felt, like we keep saying, there's just like a lot of missteps in the second half. Like, I'm fine with the Tyrion stuff, but even like some of the Tyrion stuff I thought wasn't well explained or shown well enough, like, or very tropey. I mean, like, you know, we get, you know, when you've got Tyrion shadowing you, like they're alluding to like this mold on the walls, and you know, like the jail is, you know, molding and, you know, becoming decrepit, and the mother's house like is also doing this and stuff. But like, I don't know, I kind of felt like they didn't show it well enough. I'm like, I get what you're trying to say, but I was like, I'm not really like, other than you showing me some black spots on a wall, I'm not you're not really portraying what's going on here. I don't really get his overall power. I guess he just kind of makes you do what he wants you to do, kind of, sometimes. Like, obviously, It's this, like, Rosemary's Baby type of thing going on, but I thought so much of this just felt borrowed from so many different things, and then, like, kind of half-ass sewn together to make this, like, demon story work.
Yeah, for me, what I'll just say about the mold and all that is, I've worked in locations in film. I've been in people's houses that they just live in that have that much mold in certain places. Maybe they are infested or, you know, possessed by Tyrion and I didn't know. But obviously it's something when you're watching the movie, but it didn't even really stand out to me as like a visual indicator of like, oh, if there's mold, Tyrion is here. It just seemed like, yeah, these are old, decrepit, kind of cursed places, more or less. But I will agree with you that Tyrion feels like Chris Stuckman watched Hereditary like everyone else watched Hereditary, and they were like, you know what? Satan is out. Satan's not scary anymore. We have to come up with a different demon or a different entity, and it can't just be Satan. You know, it has to be Payman, or it has to be whatever other name. Yeah. And it just seems like Tyrion was something that he came up with or found, you know, looking through like a demonology book. And obviously a lot of people are familiar with succubus or incubus, you know, being like the male version of it. To me, it was just like having this idea of Tyrion, the incubus, who's just this like demonic figure who consistently rapes you know, the sister to try and bring about his brood, essentially, like this, you know, this infant, this cursed demonic infant. I feel like I've seen it before, but I also feel like as like, you know, his feature directorial debut to be like, you know what? The core thing I want to say in this movie is that when Riley was captured, she was raped repeatedly by a big demon is a little bizarre for the core like revelation of your movie and this mystery that I wouldn't go so far to say it was in bad taste. It's certainly not something I would be like comfortable doing or what I would want to do in my directorial debut. If you're going there, it needs to be like for a good reason. And for me, it just felt like it was very cliched explanation. And, you know, we've seen demon babies or antichrist sort of stuff over the last couple of years now. So Tyrion for me feels like a stand-in of like Payman, just where he wanted to get something more creative. And then I'm sorry, maybe this isn't even intentional, but almost the final shot of the movie being Tyrion behind your main character and putting the hand over the one shoulder, like the shadowed hand, instantly for me was just like The Witch with Anya Taylor-Joy in the, you know, with Black Phillip in the shed, and he transforms into like, you know, a demon or whatnot behind her and puts his hand like over her shoulder. It was just like so blatant to me that, don't get me wrong, in your movies, of course you can pay homage to movies you enjoy and movies you love. It's just like for it to be like basically the ending shot of your movie, and for in The Witch that to be kind of the final shot before she goes off into the woods to go with like the Witch's Coven. It was just the sort of thing where I was just like, maybe don't do that. maybe don't like evoke so strongly another horror movie that does this so well and so chilling, where in this movie it does it pretty poorly and it's like weird CGI and kind of sloppy. So I don't know, man. It's the third act here I don't think is effectively explained. I don't think most people would be able to be like, oh yeah, Tyrion, he's the god of mischief or the god of, you know.
No, you don't know.
Whatever. You would never know any of that, right?
We have
it's
no
like,
idea what these babies, like this baby can do, why he wants it. It's whatever.
Yeah, it's sort of like Tyrion looked in through the window, saw these two girls when they were young, and it was essentially like, they're going to be useful for me, and then just followed them for all of their days and got his hellhounds to watch them and, you know, made the events of the movie play out, I guess, is kind of what the explanation is. It's just, I don't know, I just wish it was a little bit more effective, I guess, in some conveying some of this, or at least it did it in a more interesting or a more scary or creative way. For me, it was the sort of thing where I just kind of like shrugged at the end. I was like, yeah, okay, that was the ending of the movie. You know, Riley gets torn apart by bad CGI hellhounds, I guess. There we go. You know, that's what we all came here to see. But yeah, I don't know if there's too much else to really talk about. This is the sort of thing where the spoiler section is just, there's not really much to say about it.
There's a demon,
it
guys.
kind of
That's
feels like the sort of movie that we've all seen before. I will say there was a jump scare that got me as well.
Nice. What was it?
It was not a weird CGI hellhound, but it was in the moment where we were kind of trying to figure out who was in the house. And it was like, I think she was watching like the VHS tape, and it was kind of going around, and there's someone going outside with the camera, and they go around the corner really quick. And as soon as they go around the corner, the guy is right there and like smacks up against the camera, and you know, like they're done for. That weirdly got me. I think it was just like the combination of actually building up some good tension there mixed with like the sound design and whatnot. Well, I will say, we haven't really talked about the tension. He does do a good job at some points in this movie building up the tension for sure. But yeah, no, there's nothing else I really want to point out. Really. No. I guess this has the old crone trope in it as well with the creepy old lady. I mean, at least she's not naked and running around, I guess, like in a lot of other these sorts of movies. But it was definitely something that I clocked, that I was like, oh, okay, very good. The creepy old lady in the woods is the key to all of this again. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. Rowan, what would you give Shelby Oaks?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to land on an okay with this one. There was a lot of stuff I did like in it, and even, like I said, the stuff that I didn't like, I was kind of, I think, a little more forgiving because of the stuff I liked was that strong. I do think it's hilarious that we just love we basically just love the opening credit scene of this, and that's
we love the first 20 minutes of the movie, and it's so effectively done that we're like, the rest of it's pretty bad, but not bad enough.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I'm very interested. You kind of said it all. I'm interested. I'd like to see him direct, not write, have a more competent writer. But I am interested to see what his eyes like, maybe in like either a full out found footage movie or maybe just a full out movie that isn't found footage. I'm interested to see what he's got next. So, job mission complete, I guess. You got me interested. You're not someone I'm going to ignore and be like, I have no interest in that. So I feel like an okay is fair for this. I didn't hate my time watching it, and luckily didn't die while I watched it. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, the first 20-25 minutes is definitely a yay. It's very well done. It's very effective. It's, when I was watching it, I was genuinely impressed at certain points of just being able to recreate that feeling of actual news footage, actual YouTube footage, found footage, and, mockumentary style, just merging it all together. It was very much like, oh shit, like, Stuckman, he's got it. This is very impressive. But as we've now kind of belabored the point, after that point, it just kind of gets increasingly bad or worse, but it's still a relatively short movie, so it doesn't really go on long enough that it kind of makes you forget about how good the first 20-25 minutes of the movie was. So yeah, there's not a whole lot here novel outside of just kind of your curiosity of seeing Chris Stuckman direct the movie and see if he can effectively make one, which he can. It's just not a great horror movie. It's not something that, like, I'm not sitting here counting down the days to the next Chris Stuckman movie. I'm sitting here basically being like, yeah, the next time he does one, hopefully it's, he has a stronger writer or just takes some more time himself to develop his voice and his script. And, he makes something better. I would like to see him commit one way or the other in terms of his stylistic sensibilities, just because, similar to what you said, doing this in his next movie, if he wanted to start it off with 20-25 minutes of found footage mockumentary, is not going to work a second time. We already know that you can do it. So either commit one way or the other. But either way, I am interested to see what he does next. And yeah, it's going to be an okay from me as well. It's, it's shows that he has promise, but, not like something that I would like entirely recommend that everyone should check out, that this is like a great horror movie or anything. If you're a fan of our show, you've probably seen a lot of this already. And if you're not following us already on our socials, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Bluesky, TikTok. If there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Mark, Steven, Dan, Brian, Trevor, and James, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams, hosted by Jill, and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Now, Rowan, probably nothing really from these movies making the playlist. There's no like, track that stands out to me.
No, I do like the score in context of the movie for Shelby Oaks, but I don't know if it's gonna make the playlist or stuff. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what makes it there. I got some stuff I gotta upload here maybe tonight or tomorrow. But you can find out when I upload that by going to Spotify and looking up the It Slays Podcast horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned. Go in the bio, click the Linktree link. It'll take you directly there. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So follow it. I update it regularly and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, I don't believe we've really settled on anything just yet. There seems to be some interest in doing an episode of it on Good Boy, or maybe Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Not really sure, but
I feel like we'll gotta do Bone Lake for Freaky Jill.
Bone Lake, very good. I don't know if I'll be on Bone Lake, but regardless, we'll be back with something soon enough. So keep your eyes and ears out for those when it does drop. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.